All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of 300 to 3000. I am one of your hosts, Spencer Sutton, and I've got back with me Matthew Whitaker. Matthew, welcome back to the show, man.
Hey, what's up, Spence? Glad to be here and excited about today's topic because it's certainly a hot topic in our industry right now. And you even talked about the clickbait that what you were gonna name this show before we got on. So really
I'm trying
excited.
to get as many people to listen to this one as possible because I think it's really important. People do want to hear about it, though.
Yeah, I think even somebody that's not interested in selling their business right now is probably focused on understanding what the value of it is. And so we are here to dispel all the myths around property management company valuation.
Yeah, I actually had a conversation with a property management owner last week. And this is one of the questions he asked was, because in his plan, his model is he's at 300 to 400 properties right now. He's going to get to 10,000 and sell. And so that's he was wondering, what is the multiple? How much do companies like yours, like Evernest, pay for companies? And so to talk about that, we brought in the expert,
the resident expert.
The Evernest expert, Josh Heintz. Josh, welcome to the show, man.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Long time listener, first time on the podcast.
I'm surprised to see you in the office. Like, you have been burning up the road. You're at all these conferences. So if you don't know Josh, you definitely need to look for him at any of your conferences, and you can meet him.
Indeed. Glad to always meet with anybody and have these conversations. The M&A space is super exciting. Like Matthew was mentioning, it's one of the hottest topics in the industry right now, and always get peppered with questions. And so excited to be able to jump on here and answer a lot of them again.
Yeah, I don't think we're just going to cover the valuation question, but we are going to cover it, everybody. But we're also going to cover a couple other questions that all owners want to know. So let's get started. We'll go ahead and tackle the valuation question since that's what we offered up. So Josh, we get a lot of phone calls of property management company owners. Sometimes they'll call very early in the process, right? Like, I'm 2 to 3 years out from selling my business. Sometimes something has happened recently and they need to sell their business fairly quickly. But one of the first questions they ask is, tell me how you value the business. And so I'd love to hear kind of like how you typically answer that for people that call.
Yeah, and that is a great question. It's the hottest question that anybody has when it comes to, wanting to know what the valuation of their business is. And so I would start out by saying, the industry has really gotten hung up on the idea of a multiple, be it a revenue multiple or be it a net profitability multiple. And those things in years past have been far more important maybe than what they are today, because the industry has really looked at multiples historically kind of in a rudimentary way. People, 20 years ago, you may have talked to somebody that they wouldn't even buy your book. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that are just shocked by the fact that you can sell now your property management company. 15 or 20 years ago, you just gave it to somebody else in the industry. And so, 10 plus years ago, people started, trading these books and selling them. And the process has become much more refined now. But people are really still a little bit hung up into what a revenue multiple may be. So just kind of unpack that a little bit. And this is the thing that, people are, constantly asking, what's the revenue multiple? What's the multiple? And so,
hey, Josh, real quick before we go on, is there any way we can go back to the model where people just give everybody their book? Like, is that ever going to come back? Because that would be fantastic.
We try. We have those conversations. It turns out that those conversations go really quickly.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm just kidding.
No, So generally speaking, there is a wide range, and this is, some people may hear this and think, well, dang, that doesn't help a whole lot. But generally speaking, the range of the multiple is going to land historically for us and others in the industry somewhere between 0.8 times revenue and 1.5 times revenue. Now, that's usually where the number winds up landing. But I think what's important for people to understand is that revenue multiple is actually a byproduct of the valuation of the business. So if you think about it, you could back your way into a multiple regardless. So, I mean, at any number that came up, you can say, oh, well, that was the multiple. But the way that we come to the multiple is through evaluating a number of quantitative and qualitative data. And so there are things that are really important in the valuation, not just what your revenue's been, but what type of revenue is it? So if you're a $1 million company and you have, $700,000 in property management income, and you have $200,000 in brokerage income, and you have $100,000 in maintenance income, you're probably looking at that top line and saying, okay, well, I'm a $1 million revenue company, so I should be somewhere between that 0.8 and that 1.5. But in reality, what's happening is we're evaluating the property management revenue, not the total revenue of your business, but the property management revenue of your business. And then even within that revenue, there are subsets of revenue. So when we're looking at it, what is your fee model? Are you charging a flat rate? Or are you charging a percentage? If you're charging a flat rate, then you're not a book that's going to be able to take advantage of rising rent rates over a period of time. So we've got to take account for that. We've got to look at seeing, are you including things like a resident benefits package? Are you charging, simple fees like pet fees and, tenant placement fees and that sort of thing? And so all of those, the makeup of your revenue also has an impact on what the multiple is going to be.
Let me jump in here. I think it's important for people to understand why we value revenue differently. A multiple of revenue or a multiple of something is typically a way you value things you can predict in the future, right? Because if I have some sort of recurring revenue business, software businesses are like this. If I have a recurring revenue business, then I'm valuing the future cash flow of that business. If I have something that's very transactional like brokerage, and we're in a softening market right now where we also have a brokerage business, it's softening, we're brokering less deals. Well, that's not a recurring revenue business. In other words, if the market softens, that's going to go down. Whereas if the market softens for property management, we're still going to collect that monthly revenue. So I think that's the whole reason that people, what I would say is not all revenues created equally, and that monthly revenue, that monthly recurring revenue business is super important. Now, the other thing I think a lot of people want to go off of EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, and thinking about a multiple off that. And I think one of the things we get is a lot of like inbounds that say, oh, well, I have a $1 million business and my expenses are only 300,000 or something really low like that. And then, I keep, all these other owner benefit. Well, sometimes that's the case, but sometimes, that same $1 million business, once you adjust for owner benefits and adjust for, having to replace that owner with somebody to run the business, that you get down to more of an EBITDA of $50,000. And I know that's a wide swing, but I think the reason the industry uses revenue is because EBITDA really doesn't exist. And honestly, the way we look at it, it wouldn't even be to the benefit of the seller for us to use an EBITDA multiplier, which is typically what is expected in recurring revenue businesses. So the great thing for sellers is we use this revenue multiplier because it actually puts more money in the seller's pocket. And then when we move that onto our platform, we're able to, to get some benefits of that seller's revenue based on the infrastructure that we've already built. But point being, all revenue is not created equal. And we use a revenue multiplier in most instances, just because it is it's to the seller's benefit.
So what about other types of, other like the makeup of the company otherwise, like other than that? Because Josh, you and I were slacking back and forth, and you were even talking about like the owner density of the portfolio matters. So there's a lot of different things that we will go in and look at with these companies.
Yeah, 100%. So it's not, the revenue is critically important because obviously that's the driver behind the business. But there are other more qualitative factors that are important too. So if we're looking at somewhere like, for instance, Atlanta, if you're familiar with driving the loop there in Atlanta, it could take you, 2 hours to get from one end of the city to the other. And so if we're evaluating a place like Atlanta, there are a lot of property management companies in Atlanta. And if you manage properties that are scattered all throughout the greater Atlanta metro, then there's going to be a wide range that, what we refer to as windshield time, that we're going to have our techs on the ground going, back and forth between these units to help manage. Now, luckily for us, if you're in the Atlanta market, don't let that dissuade you. We manage all over the market, but just using that as an example, because if you were, for instance, someone who was in Northeast Atlanta and you had a portfolio that, say, had 150 units in it, but all of them were scattered all throughout the entire greater Atlanta metro, that's a little bit more difficult of a portfolio to manage because it is such a scattered book. Same thing with owner density. One thing that we pay a lot of attention to is owner density. So we always ask, who is your largest owner? What percentage of the portfolio do they hold? And then what is the makeup of your top five? And a general rule of thumb of what we look at is we want to see that largest owner at or under around 5%. If you have an owner that is, say, 20% of your portfolio or higher, we're still going to be interested in talking to you about it. But that increases the risk significantly for us that if they were to decide to go somewhere else, then that could greatly impact the valuation of the business. And so that multiple then kind of slides down when we see things like that.
I think the other thing, and that was great information, Josh. The other thing I always think about is, like, what is strategically important to the seller? I guess not strategically important, but what's important to the seller? And, if the seller is willing to take on more risk, be it through a clawback or through some sort of owner financing, we're willing to have to pay more for that if the seller takes on more risk. And then if we take on more risk as the buyer, in other words, you say, I want no attrition clause or clawback, and I'm not willing to owner finance it. I just want to show up at closing and Evernest to give me a check. Then we're assuming a lot of the risk of attrition of that portfolio. And so we would basically move the check number at closing down, that, the total purchase price down, to cover and account for the extra risks that we're taking on. Because one of the things people have to keep in mind is, we're buying the future revenue. We're buying the future cash flow of the business. And if there's a chance that goes away, and like Josh said, whether it's a big owner or some series of owners leave, then we lose that money. In other words, we lost the money that we thought we were going to get from that portfolio. So I think that's the other thing, is just risk. Where are we going to shift the risk? Is it Evernest going to assume more of the risk, or is the seller going to assume more of the risk?
That's a tremendous point, because it is all about risk. And that's a lot of the conversation that we have with these sellers at various points in the process are them trying to figure out, hey, what is the likelihood? And a lot of times they're investigating us, right? Because they know that the industry standard is that there's going to be some type of a clawback in a deal. And so that varies. There are some deals that come with clawback, some that do not. And there's always an opportunity for us to talk about what a deal may look like with or without one. But when they're thinking about that as an industry standard, they're evaluating us to say, hey, what is the likelihood that you coming in is going to make some of my owners leave? And, that's where we can, luckily tell them that we've done this a lot of times. It's the hedgehog principle for us. We've just done it over and over and over again. We've gotten really good at it over time. And so our risk of attrition after acquisition is really low. It's no different than the risk of attrition in our overall portfolio for organically grown owners. And so that gives potential sellers to us a lot of confidence in that we're not going to undo a lot of the good that they've done.
Josh, It took a lot of pain to get to the point where we executed really well. And look, we're not perfect. We don't execute perfectly all the time. There's probably some people that we just bought that would say they're not executing 100%. But but it took a lot of pain to get us to the point where we executed that well.
Matthew, I remember I was just thinking about like 2016 when we were like our first out of state acquisition was in Nashville. And Josh, it was so bad that I was in on some of these conversations. Like that's how bad it was. Like we were
dragging bottom of the barrel.
we were dragging the marketing and salesperson to talk about the 3 different offers that we were going to, make to this seller, and it ended up working out. And you're right, we've gone through a lot of pain. So you bring love. What'd you say?
Clearly, we've come a long way. Like nobody even thought about inviting Spencer to the investment committee.
There is an investment committee. I just see y'all. I keep passing the door. I keep passing the meeting room, hoping y'all ask me to come in, but you never did.
It's like a joke. Hey, y'all want to invite Spencer? So circling back, though, I think the other thing that drives value is also the buyer's like intentions and strategy, right? Like the way I think about it, where we want to be, or where we, have what we feel like is a strategic reason to be either in that market or to add doors in that market. We are willing to pay more for those businesses because we think whether it's through value accretion, meaning we can make more money out of that portfolio, or it's strategically important for us to be in that market, we are willing to kind of like stretch to get into those markets. So some of the value is also created on the seller side, in that since we're a strategic buyer, we also will look at those things and think, is this going to strategically help us in our overall business and strategy?
So Josh, you're talking with a lot of people. A lot of people are calling you on the phone. They're meeting you at conferences. They're asking all the questions. So talk about some of the most common questions that you get, because I'm sure for every one person that comes up to you or calls you and has that conversation, there's 20 that don't, but are asking or thinking the same thing. So what are some of the most common questions that you hear?
Yeah, no question about that. So the easiest way for me to remember it is always the 3 Ps. So people want to know 1, price, 2, people, and 3, process. How much are you going to pay me? What's going to happen to my people? And what does the process of selling look like? Because really, all of those present their own, interesting stress points for potential sellers. The price, we've already talked a lot about that. And kind of the last thing I'll say about that is de-risk your book. Make sure that you're maximizing revenue. Organizations like NARPM, they have tremendous resources to help you understand how to build your book in a way that you are maximizing revenue per door. That's a huge component of it. And make sure that you're, as an owner, if you have the ability to do less in the business, that's always a good thing. So if you're an owner that has to work 75 hours a week to keep things going, it's not necessarily going to affect the value that we're going to pay you for your business. But when we look at a book that is run really, really well, and they've got great people, and this segues myself into number 2, when we start asking about people, that's one of the things that usually comes up. Either, hey, I have to do everything myself, and I've just got some people helping me. I know Matthew and Spencer talk a lot about, being the genius with 1,000 helpers. And if you are in that mode, that's okay. There's a lot of people that are in that space. But if you've built a great team, not only is that going to be attractive to a potential buyer like us, but it's also going to really help us in the transition where we start to evaluate those people. So the one thing that Matthew and I and everybody here at Evernest always talks about is we have to have great people. Having great people is a non-negotiable for us to be able to continue to grow and to be the company that we want to be. And if you're an organization that has great people, we want to talk to them. We want them to be a part of our growth and a part of our story. And so, while we can never guarantee that, hey, we're going to provide everybody in your organization employment in perpetuity. We can definitely say, hey, we need great people. We have to have great people. We want to talk to them. And if there is an interest on their part to be a part of our organization, then we try to make sure that there's a home for everybody when possible.
Just to piggyback on that, the hardest thing we do, like literally, I just got out of a meeting that was almost an hour long about finding people. And the hardest thing we do, because this is still a people business, people have tried to replace it with technology. But at the end of the day, you still need great people at the market level. Is finding these people is incredibly important. And so just like Josh said, what I like to tell sellers is, look, if you've already found them, great. Like that's tremendous value to us. Now, the other inverse of that is some people have been working at a certain size business and enjoy that size business. And when they come over, they kind of self-select and say, I don't want to work for, an Evernest, no matter who it was. And so that's fine, because we are going to change some processes that will benefit Evernest. But they're going to self-select out. And then there's other people that we frankly don't have a perfect position for them. And then we're certainly fair to them and very open to them. But it's also a benefit sometimes. You have some of these sellers that, if you have 5 or 10 people on your team, things like health insurance. Health insurance, you get a certain price if you have 10 people. If you have 300 or 400 people like we have now, then obviously that we get a better price on health insurance. We have a 401k. We have the ability for people's team to grow within the organization. I always tell the story of Gray Hall, who came here when he was 24. He was working in leasing. He kind of bought into the vision and worked his tail off. And he's just worked his way up through our organization. And he's running one of the biggest departments in our business now, from leasing through property management, team leader of Birmingham, team leader of Denver, and now running our whole brokerage business that's doing 80 to 100 transactions during the peak, 80 to 100 transactions a month. Point being, like that, there, with a smaller company, that ability to grow may not be there. And so we are also able to offer them a career path if that's something that they want.
I think probably one of the first times this was done for us successfully, Matthew, in an acquisition. So Gray, we hired ourselves, but I'm just thinking about Erin Dreyer in Little Rock. Like Erin I think she was doing some
PMT work.
Yeah, some PMT work. Yeah, she was doing some technician work out in the field, and then she just continued to improve. Then she was property manager. Then she was team leader of our Little Rock office, and now we've replaced her, and she's doing what she loves, which is out selling and meeting owners.
Yeah, that was the funny thing. We talked a few episodes back about growing from $0 to $1 million in revenue, and she was definitely like the hustler, the executor, the person that's willing to pick up the phone and get us to $1 million. And then she decided, hey, I don't want to continue on this journey.
Yep.
Yeah. And one of the things that
let me finish this real quick. Maybe we can cut out that part where I got a frog in my throat. She said, I don't want to end this. I don't want to continue this journey of growing this business from 1 to 3 million on the team leader side, but I love growing a business. And so she's moved over into business development for us.
Yeah. When I saw her in the office not long ago, she was here for some training. She was like, Spencer, how come you never told me how great being in sales was? Like, how come you never recruited me over? I was like, because we didn't want
you to know, Aaron.
We needed you running the market and selling at the same time, which she did really well for quite some time.
What's been interesting is really just what we're talking about, is how often this comes up in conversation. I was literally on the phone this week with a gentleman who owns a 1,000-unit business. And one of the things that he said was, hey, I've got about 25 people on my team, but we don't currently offer healthcare. And so, our team would be ecstatic. He said, I've been really okay with just being where we are, but I got a lot of hungry people on my team that want to grow the business and they want to continue to move up and grind. And he was like, I'm just comfortable. And so I've decided, hey, we're at these 1,000 units. We want to stick there. And so when we're talking to potential owners, they get excited about the potential opportunity that bringing their team on with us can afford some of those people who really want to take their career to the next level. And, in a growing organization that's growing as rapidly as we are, there's going to constantly be opportunities that come up. And we need people, in the pipeline that we're moving through to be able to be the next leaders in this organization. And so when I talk to potential sellers about this, they get really excited about that. And I think that's really neat. And that's a huge testament, in my opinion, when I'm talking to a potential seller. Their interest, their involvement, their desire to see their team well taken care of is usually an indicator that that's a well-run business. Because if you're taking care of your people, you're taking care of your owners. If you're taking care of your owners, you're probably profitable. And if you're profitable, then we want to talk to you about your business.
And it frankly scares me when somebody doesn't ask that question. I'm kind of like, if they're just very transactional and like, how much is the most you can pay for me? I'm thinking, all they've done is essentially grinded on their people. We're going to get a bunch of dead racehorses that all of them need to be taken out of the pasture. And so, look, I really appreciate it when people ask that question, because like you said, Josh, it shows that it's a really well-run business.
Yeah. So once you've adjusted for the price, once you've talked a little bit about the people, the next thing is the process for them. And it's, hey, what does this look like? Because there is most people, we've done this. At the end of this month, we'll close our 30th acquisition. But most people, when they sell a business, they do it once, and that's the end for them. So they're not doing this frequently. There's a lot of fear in the unknown. And so the good thing for us is it's really a simple process. First is just a discovery call. We jump on a phone call. We have a conversation, a very informal conversation about your business, about your interests, your needs. Why do you want to sell and what timeline are you looking to sell? We talk about your team. Talk a little bit about your portfolio. And then from there, we usually will have an NDA or a non-disclosure agreement that is signed by both parties. It protects their information. It protects ours as we begin the conversation. Just a few pieces of information. We usually just need a current rent roll just to take a look at the portfolio. We want to see some recent financials. And then we want to usually take a look at the management agreement just to make sure that the language in there all adds up to our ability, if in the event that we were to acquire that company, that we actually could acquire that company, because some management agreements implicitly state that you cannot acquire those management agreements. So we look at a couple of things like that. And then, as you probably heard us mention earlier, we have an investment committee. So we take all that information, we package it together, and there's a group that all looks at that collectively to see how we feel like that potential company would fit in our portfolio and what we feel the valuation is. And then from there, we go back and have a conversation with the seller about either kind of red light or green light. Yes, we're interested in moving forward, or no, this just doesn't fit what we would like to do. And then an offer is made. And then from the point that the offer is made, if it's accepted, then it's a little bit more diligence. We look a little bit deeper at some of the historical financial information. We ask some more in-depth questions about the team and that sort of thing. And then it's closing. At the end of it, they get a big, nice check, and we get a wonderful company. So it's really there's a lot of components to it, but we have refined that over the last 29 acquisitions. We have a very detailed checklist that we go through as we're working through the process. And we do it in a way that we try to take as much stress off of that seller in the process as humanly possible, because it's an emotional time, right? I mean, these are people who have committed, a decade, sometimes 2 or 3 decades to this profession, and they want to make sure as great of a name as they've had throughout their time that, they continue to keep their name. One more thing, one of the coolest conversations that I was in recently, we are going to be closing on a business at the end of this year that there was a seller who was talking to us and a couple of other people. And when we were talking, he said, I chose to go with you because at the end of the day, what I needed from selling my company is I needed to get a fair price for my company, and I needed to keep my name intact. And so knowing that a seller trusts us to not just pay, because we're going to pay you fairly, right? We're not in the business of trying to nickel and dime. I mean, look, you've worked.
Those are table stakes, right? Like, you've got to pay fairly or you're not in this game to begin with.
No question. And so we're going to honor you with a proper price for your business. But then we're going to make sure that you get out of this with your name intact, because people that have done this for a long time, they've developed a relationship with these owners. They've been managing now their friends' houses for years and years and years and years. And it's important to them that transition goes smoothly and it goes well. And so knowing that we've got the type of reputation, Matthew, that you and Spencer in this company for so many years have built the type of reputation that people entrust us with, that is just it's a humbling thing to be able to be a part of.
Well, I was just about to say, I managed for Spencer for a long time, and I didn't really care whether what he thought about me.
I tried to fire him like 20 times, and kidding.
Totally kidding. Yeah, just a couple of things. It was funny when we first bought our first business. We sat down and brainstormed a list of about 50 things we thought you would have to do to buy a business, and today that list is like 150. Right? Like, it's just like so much. It's like 3 times the size. So we've figured out a lot of ways not to do it. The other thing I think is important to highlight here is a lot of people know Tim Wayner, who is the NARPM president, and he is the one that leads our integration team. One of the things we found was to have a successful transition, you really need a team of Evernest people focused on training and communicating and making sure that we execute on the blocking and tackling. And Tim Wayner is running that for us and doing an incredible job. Like, he's really taking the bull by the horns. I was on a call with him the other day with his team, and I'm like, man, you just went in and handpicked some of the best people out of our organization to be on your team. And he got a kick out of that, but I think he thought that was the truth. But it's certainly it's a benefit to have somebody that is transitioning that business, that's focused on it, that it's not like a side job. It's somebody full-time focused on making sure that we execute, especially that first 90 days. I mean, we found that the first 60 to 90 days, owners are like really curious and interested and worried. And if we do a really good job for the first 60 or 90 days, then they kind of settle back into more of a regular cadence.
So how come Tim didn't ask me to be on his team? You said he handpicked the very best from the company.
He actually wanted somebody that would like get crap done. And and so he mentioned, I saw like a ranking, and you were like dead last on his list.
I was 360.
You were
360 people.
Yeah, you were whatever the last number was. You were.
I will say this about Tim: he is tenacious and he follows up with stuff, which is great. I don't have a lot of detail, but he's like he takes the initiative, and his whole team does. So it's really fantastic. So it's gotten to be, from what I've heard, it's gotten to be a really dialed in and tuned in process that sellers are really happy to go through. So
yeah, we try to make it that way. And it's an exhaustive process. I mean, in terms of just the things that we walk through, but we try to take as much of that off of potential seller as possible to make it easy for them. But one thing that I'll say is, a lot of people are, as Matthew mentioned earlier, super transactional, and as potential buyers, from a lot of what we hear from potential sellers, what they tell us is, hey, I talk to people, and if I'm not going to sell them their business today, then they just kind of throw me to the wind. And so one of the things that I want to make sure that everybody understands is, we want to be a resource, right? The thing that we understand is, there are a lot of property management companies out there, and people's exit from this business is to sell, unless they're going to hand it down to, family, unless there's another plan. But, 95% or greater property management companies, when it's time for them to leave, they're going to sell. And so a lot of people just have questions. And, one thing I would encourage is, if you just have questions, we're here to answer those questions. If you want to know, hey, what can I do? What is my evaluation today? We'll give you a valuation, what we feel like your business is worth today. And if you say, hey, how can I get that to X, Y, or Z in the future? We have a lot of those conversations. Somebody says, hey, my property management company is worth $750,000. I'd like to sell it for $1 million, and I want to sell it in 2 years. Well, we're happy to talk to you about that. And at some point in the future, if you choose to come back to us and sell it, or if you choose to sell it to somebody else, that's okay. I mean, we just want to be a resource for people in this space. There's a lot of hidden information. There's a lot of gatekeeping when it comes to, what's your valuation and, would you sell, would you buy, that sort of thing. So if you're interested, reach out, lean on me, lean on Matthew. We're always available. Tim, if you see him, Spencer, if you can find him, any of us, we're happy to have that conversation, because again, we just want to be a resource to help people. Because if you're selling in 3 months, or if you're selling in 3 years, it is the most important thing you will do when you exit this business. And we want to make sure that we can help you do it the right way.
And that's what this podcast is really about, right? Like, this is a resource. And we get that feedback that people are taking this, they're implementing certain things in their business, which is fantastic. We want to do it. The whole part, like the whole thing that Matthew and I were talking about, is we want to see companies grow from 300 to 3,000. And then if we can buy them when they're there, or when they're at 10,000, or anywhere in between, we want to have those conversations.
My parting thing, the one funny little story, well, actually kind of funny and sad. Met with a gentleman at the NARPM National Convention, had lunch with him, and he had a lot of questions. This is a younger guy. He's unfortunately had some tragedy early on in his life, and he's a planner, and he wants to make sure that in the event that if something were to happen to him, he can give his wife a list of, this is what you do and this is who you call in the event that I were to pass. This is how you liquidate your company. And so we sat at lunch and, talked through here are all the things that you would need to tell her that she would need to do, all of these steps to be able to effectively liquidate that company quickly. And I told him, I was like, look, I'll give here, obviously you've got my name, but I'll give you the name of other people that would be interested in buying that company. Because, heaven forbid, and I told him, I said, look, man, I don't want to buy your company because you passed. I want you to grow it to be a monster and then let me buy it in 20 years with you happy and healthy and selling off into the sunset. So again, we just want to be a resource. A lot of people want to have, the conversation, they have questions to ask. And so whatever that thing is that may be driving you or interesting you, even if it's just a conversation, we're always happy to just have that conversation.
Well, Josh, this has been awesome. So if somebody did want to have that conversation with you, how can they get in touch with you? What's the best way?
Yeah. So they're outside of just showing up with a nice peach cobbler at the office. They could shoot me a text or give me a call on my cell. It's 205-567-2246. They can also shoot me an email at Heintz, that's HEINTZ at Evernest.co. And you can also go on our website, and there's a place there where you can inquire about acquisitions. And then those emails will come into us, and then we'll reach back out to you. But those are the two best ways to get in touch with me.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. Thanks for being here. I think this was very, very helpful. And if you haven't already, go and sign up for our property manager newsletter. You can find that at evernest.co/PM newsletter, and you can sign up. We'll be sending emails out or newsletters out to you once every 2 weeks. All right, everybody, we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of 300 to 3000.